and welcome to Concert Pipeline. I'm Steve Jones. Today on the program, we have an artist named Ryan Culwell, who I actually just talked to today. We had a really good chat. He has a new album coming out next week, Friday the 28th, actually. It's called Run Like a Bull. So definitely recommend checking it out. I had a chance to listen to it and enjoyed it. We had a really good chat, so we'll get into that in just a few minutes. Before we do, let me share a little update about what's going on in my world. Well, I think I should start with what's going on in the world as a whole, and that is, COVID is crazy. I think it feels like everybody's getting it. Some people get it and don't know they got it. Some symptoms can be pretty mild. And then others, it's spreading to, and their testing is negative, but I don't know, it's a whole weird situation. But I will say that my daughter had to be out of school for 5 days because she went home with a headache. And we kept her out the next day just as a precaution while we were figuring things out. Then I emailed the school the following morning and I was like, hey, my daughter's going to be coming to school. And they're like, yeah, the heck she is. Not until 5 days have passed, and then she has a negative test, even though her only symptom was a headache. When will the day be back where a headache can just be a headache, right? I grew up getting migraines all the time. I still get them once in a while now, but not as frequently. But a headache is just a headache unless it's partnered with other symptoms usually, right? So that was pretty frustrating. I get it, really. I do, and I want everybody to be safe, and we all got to look out for each other, get vaccinated, all that stuff, right? Boosted. The boosters should help with the current strain, but hopefully the numbers are going down. I haven't looked that closely, I'll be honest, but I know we're kind of simmering off of what was expected to be the peak, and hopefully as we get into spring, it gets even better. But that's just nuts. I told my daughter after that, I was like, don't call to come home unless you're dying. And I was half joking, but also there's a half piece of me that's serious, right? It's like, gosh, if you're going to go home for a little thing like that and then have to be out of school for subsequent days, our kids need to be in school. They need to be there. And as long as she's vaxxed and masked, it's like, okay, what's the harm, right? We're all going to get it anyway. So it's just like, let's just get this over with. It feels like that's how I feel. I know that may not be a popular opinion, but we've been in this for better part of 2 years now, and life will go on. We need to treat this as a sickness. We need to look out for each other and be safe, but let's not overdo it, right? If we take precautions, this doesn't have to be a horrible thing right now. That's how I feel there. Also, I'm in conversations with my kid's mom and stepdad to potentially move in the future, sometime this year. I may be buying my first house. I haven't bought a house yet. I know it's shocking, right? But I'm pushing 40 and never bought a house. I live in California. I have a single income now, especially, and it's never been an option, especially in Napa where I live. Things are not cheap. So I might be buying a house outside of town somewhere, which I'm nervous about. I've lived in this place for 8 years, so it's the most home of any home I've been in. Never been in a place for more than a couple years at best, and so I like it here. It's calm. I enjoy it, aside from a couple of issues with my neighbors, and they're shitty yappy dogs that bark all the time. They have like 7 dogs, and their Amazon packages, which come to my house practically every day. I actually 15 minutes ago ran outside to stop the Amazon delivery driver and let them know, hey, okay, yeah, their house is up there, at the front of the property, sort of thing. It happens all the time that I get their packages, or I have to stop the Amazon driver from delivering them to my address. So that's an annoyance, but there's going to be neighborly annoyances wherever you go, right? I mean, there just is. So I'm looking at houses a couple of towns over and seeing what's in my price range, what is good. I I'm in the looking phase now. I don't want to jump because I don't want to pull my kids from school before the end of the school year. I want them to finish off the school year, and I don't want to have to drive here a couple of towns over to drop them off or pick them up. I mean, that doesn't sound like fun to me. So so I'm looking to push it as close to the end of the school year towards the beginning of summer as possible with the purchase. And I see houses, and some houses have, have rooms that are, and kind of style that is attractive. It's like, oh, this is cool, and it's in a price range. But it's then you got to take into consideration the schools and what are the best schools in the area. You want to live near the schools. Well, there's not a lot of houses available in that area, mostly because probably they're the better schools, right? So running into that roadblock a little bit, and I found myself looking at backyards a lot. That's kind of an important factor for me in terms of the home ownership, because I want there to be some grass for my dog, but also a little patio area to hang out, have a barbecue, that sort of thing. So I'm kind of finding the balance between those and making sure that it isn't all cement, because that doesn't work for having a dog really. And also a number of houses have pools in the backyard. And while I like the idea of having a pool, being able to swim in a pool, I don't want to maintain it. I don't want to maintain it. And I would probably do a piss poor job at maintaining a pool. We had an inflatable pool in my backyard here for the kids, and I didn't do a great job maintaining that, I'll be honest. It got moldy, and a mouse or rat ended up climbing into it and committing suicide. And that was the point when the pool had to go. I was like, yeah, we're done with this pool. This isn't going to make it another year. So if I can't maintain that, I certainly can't maintain an actual pool. The idea of home ownership to me is alluring. It's interesting. I am intrigued, and I am excited to have property that is actually my own. So that's pretty cool. It's also a little nerve-wracking because I've never done it before, and also I'm not the most handy person in the world, as evidenced by my inability to balance chlorine levels and whatever is needed to keep a pool from becoming moldy, or my inability to maintain a pool, right? So that's kind of concerning. I'm gonna have to spend a lot more time on YouTube in terms of fixing things, and I want to get a newer house, so I don't have to fix things as often and have issues that I run into with a house that is as old as the one I'm living in. So the house I'm living in was built in like the 50s, and it's a fine house, but I definitely am not great at maintaining it. But I'm also a renter. I don't really have to. If something goes out, then I can call the rental company and put them on it. And there's something nice to that. But if it's thousands of dollars of my own money that I'm going to be out by not being able to fix something, I'm definitely going to try it myself first if I'm confident enough in doing it, right? So we'll see. Again, I'm not looking to buy today or tomorrow or anything along those lines. It'll probably be a couple months away, and it'll put me closer to the Sacramento area, which I'm halfway there to be able to go to some shows if they're in there are concerts in the area I want to go to, when I'm starting to feel comfortable with that again. It's still not fully there. I miss concerts, and there are some shows that come around. It's like, oh, that would be fun to go to, but I don't find myself making the effort to go to them for one reason or another. Whether it's because I'm, not comfortable with the safety of it, or it's duck season and duck season has less than 2 weeks left, and I'm like, I'd rather, go hunting instead. I haven't been to many shows recently. So that's how that goes. Anyway, That's enough rambling for the top part of the show. Let's move into the conversation with the Ryan Culwell, and bring him on in. Here's my interview with Ryan Culwell. Hey, good. How's it going, Ryan?
I'm good. Steve, where you at?
Yes, I am in Napa, California, out west, and you're in Nashville, right? The Panhandle. That's kind of where you grew up, right?
Yeah, I'm actually 2 blocks away from my parents' house.
Oh, really? What's it like living so close to them?
It's good. It's been real good. It's a little crazy, you know.
Yeah,
It's we missed them for so long, and I have 4 kids, so we, enjoy the support. But also sometimes you're like, oh man, am I driving them crazy, or are they driving me crazy?
yeah, yeah,
Maybe.
yeah. And tell me about having 4 daughters. Like, what is that? What's that? Where to start, right?
Yeah. What do you want to know? I'm probably pretty rough around the edges, or used to be, and they'll soften you up pretty quick.
Yeah,
Take away all the hard edges. There we go.
sure.
See, I'm just looking at myself now. I can see you, so that's better.
Yeah, for sure.
No, they've
So
been good. They've taught me a lot, so it's been cool.
yeah. Do they have the same interest in music that you do? How are they growing up with that?
Yeah, we've brainwashed them, so they don't do any of the Justin Bieber or any of that. They don't know that stuff exists. I mean, they sort of do. It's on their peripheral, but we listen. Are we recording already? Are we in this thing?
Oh, we're in it. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool, beautiful. We've somewhat brainwashed them just by having me as a dad. They're kind of subjected to a lot of music that maybe they're 12, 10, 6, and 4, all girls. So, most groups of girls like that are probably not listening. Like today, we're listening to Butch Hancock songs, which is the guy from Lubbock, Texas, who wrote a bunch of songs. Joe Ely did a lot of them. They were in the Flatlanders. And so we're listening to a playlist called Butch Hancock songs, and it's just Joe Ely singing Butch Hancock songs and the Flatlanders and Jimmy Dale Gilmore. And so they think that's normal. They're really into Ernest Tubb. And for a long time, I wouldn't introduce them to playing music. I kind of held it back because I didn't want to be that hard-ass dad who beat him over the head with, be like me, love the things I love. So I waited forever until they basically begged me. And so it's kind of worked because now they're really into it. And I'm showing them listen to all these old songs. So we're listening to Ernest Tubb and Billy Joe Shaver and all these things. And I'm showing them that they're all the same progression. It's 1-4-5 or 1-5-4. I don't know if you're familiar with that terminology, but all these songs, every song you ever loved, it's basically the same song.
Yeah.
And so I've kind of showed them the magic behind it. And so they're like, oh, I know 3 chords. I can play almost every song that I hear. And then pretty soon, I would show them a minor chord and now they know it all. So they can barely wrap their hands around it, but they're picking up on it, and they walk around the house singing Waltz Across Texas or, things like that. It's been pretty great.
Yeah.
And
So
they were super into Bob Dylan when they were younger.
oh, nice. And so they're starting on guitar. Have they tried any other instruments? A lot of parents start with piano.
Yeah, so when we lived in Nashville, we had the luxury of during lockdown, I met my neighbors, and it was wonderful because they were a bunch of 24, 25-year-olds, and 2 or 3 drummers lived in one house, and one of them is producer, and he had 5 different bands going and just tracked during the whole pandemic. So I had my girls trade kind of the head guy over there. I said, if they mow their lawn, will you give them a drum lesson? They got 1 drum lesson in, but they're sitting around with this guy's a really, really great drummer, and he's just the guy next door. And so they get a drum lesson there. We have keyboards around, so they can, the same songs they can play on guitar, they can get around the 1-4-5 on piano a little bit too. And then so we're real close to being we've done it a few times, you play the piano and you play the guitar, and then somebody else will grab a guitar, pretend it's a bass, like the 6-year-old. It's a little easier for her to just play 1 note at a time. And so pretty soon we got a whole song going. It's pretty cool.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
so obviously you moved back to be close to your parents and family and everything. Tell me kind of how that decision came about to leave Nashville.
Well, you know, like we first went to Nashville, we left Texas and everybody thought we would go to Austin, and we went to Nashville. Just because I had a good idea what it would be like if I just went from the Panhandle down to Austin, but we switched gears, spent a decade in Nashville. It was great, beautiful people. But you know, we needed a support system, and we had friends there, but nothing like having grandma a block away, 2 blocks away. And then also like just the landscape is really important to me.
Oh, yeah.
I'm one of those weirdos that it matters. Like when we first moved to Nashville, I felt claustrophobic because it was like hills and people and trees. Like I'm not into any of it. Eventually grew to love it. But really when I drive through this part of Texas, like my whole heart opens up, my brain opens up, and I just feels easier to write. And there's that like kind of weird notion of like, who am I writing for? And when you're surrounded by industry, that can creep into your brain. But when you're out here, it's like, I'm not writing for anybody. You know, I'm just writing. And so,
Yeah.
You know, me and my wife talked about the logistics of having a little more support, especially when I'm going to be touring, hopefully a lot. And then also just my heart opens up. So you just start looking at pictures of sunsets and you want to move pretty quick.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
During your time in Nashville, what were some of your takeaways? Did you build relationships with a lot of the other songwriters there?
Yeah. There's so many great songwriters there. It's different for me than probably a lot of guys. So having kids and focused on that part of my life. So a lot of guys are just hanging out at the bars, meeting songwriters, you know, and I'm hanging out at, you know, play dates or whatever. But I did meet a lot of great songwriters. And so there's a guy named Dylan Warnick he's a maniac. He's a great songwriter. Guys like that where you're like, it's, you know, like everybody already knows it. There's the best guy within 100 miles of where you live, you know, and you can hang out with him and meet him, or you can go to Nashville and meet the best guy from every little 100-mile pocket that moved to Nashville, you know. And so the talent level is just, it's crazy, and it pushes you and opens you up. Does that make sense? You're like, there may be 1 or 2 guys that you want to hang out with at that level, you know, and there's way more. The Texas Panhandle is filled with great songwriters. But when you get to Nashville, they're all, like I said, the neighbors are, wow, there's 3 amazing drummers and a bass player, and this guy's playing jazz guitar, but he can also, you know, just happens to be your neighbor. You're like, that, you know, my neighbor here is works in the oil field, so I'm not gonna learn a lot of music from him, but I might get some good stories, you know.
Yeah. And I'm sure you went to some, you know, some great shows at like the Grand Ole Opry and that sort of thing.
Oh, man. Well, you think so? I mean, I went to some great shows, but I never went to the Opry. That's kind of not my, well, it's just not my picture. I'm like, it feels like an award show. I give a shit about the kind of formalized clubs. I wanted to hang out with the weirdos and that were writing from a different place. You know, I mean, when I first moved to Nashville, I met a woman named Amy Spees, and she was writing. You know, she's a great writer, but she was running they call it a song salon, which is like, hey, 10, 15 people show up and you all play a brand new song, may not even be finished yet. And then everybody encourages you and shows you maybe a different way that you didn't think about in the song. And, you know, just being exposed to like, oh, there's 10, like there's people in the room that have #1 songs, and there's people that are nobody, but you're really moved by them, all those kind of things. So you just eclectic group of people. So I did a lot of things like that early on, and then became buds with people. I definitely went to some cool shows, you know, went to the Ryman a few times. I've decided not to go to the Ryman anymore. I'm like, I don't want to go there if I'm not playing, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's like, I'm at the point where I'm like, let me on the stage. I'm not going to go in there and break my own heart anymore. So,
yeah, that's
fair. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So let's go back. Tell me about like your childhood musically. Like, did your parents listen to music that kind of inspired you? What was that like?
Yeah, I probably have a similar story to a lot of people. Like, I grew up in church, and so mom's playing piano and practicing at the house, and there's a little upright piano against the wall, and But what was different is my dad was obsessed with guitar my whole life. And so, you know, he's literally like, we had a long living room, and halfway through it, they just put the couch, and behind the couch, that kind of delineated the break in the room. And behind the couch, that was the music room. And there was a bass and keyboard, a couple of acoustics, 8 electric guitars, 5 amps stacked on top. You just go wild, and and so I had access to all that. I wasn't supposed to touch it most of the time, but my dad would go to work, and I'd just start, turn all the distortion pedals all the way up, see what happened. And he would come home and be like, what were you doing? It's like, I didn't touch it. And he's like, BS, you didn't touch it. It's all out of tune. Everything's turned up to 11. Let's go. But it was cool. And he listened to a lot of music, just old hippie stuff, it's great.
Yeah.
Lots of blues.
Yeah. So when did you start learning to play the guitar and kind of taking it seriously?
I don't know when I started taking it seriously. It was just so gradual, but I started messing with it at 9. Me and my brother would sit around and make up songs laying in bed. I was just always, we would make up songs and laugh about the neighbors, just make fun of them, make fun of ourselves, make fun of everything. And then you add a guitar to that. And then all of a sudden, first song I wrote when I was 9, the first one anybody remembers. And we're supposed to be getting in the car to go to my grandma's, which is like a 7-hour drive. And they couldn't get me in the car because I was like, wait, I got another verse. And I was writing the song. It was like, we're going to grandma's, to eat some cake. I live, we're going to grandma's. She lives by the lake, and all that. And that's kind of a famous song. But it also was like really indicative of how I work. Like, I don't set time aside to write, really.
Yeah.
Just always am writing in the midst of the chaos. And it has definitely caused me to be late to a lot of functions.
Yeah.
Or like, we're making dinner. I'm still doing it here. We just moved to this little rent house. My wife's like, dinner's ready. I'm like, wait, one more verse. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Is it so the writing's like an outlet for you? Do you like, I mean, obviously, so tell me kind of how you express yourself in your songs. Like, do you need a quiet place, and are you able to get to that quiet place with 4 daughters running around? Yeah.
Quiet doesn't exist in my life. And I have a little shed in the backyard that I'm fixing up. It's kind of cool, but the neighbors' dogs bark so much. I'm like, I don't know how useful it is. But I kind of thrive in the chaos. Like, I don't need like a literal quiet place. I need like an emotional space to do things, a mental space to do things. So like, if I get in an argument with my wife, I'm not writing a song. I may try, but it's just going to be like, oh, I'm so mad, yeah. But she's real kind to make sure, like, I'm not like Precious where you got to guard me so hard that it's like, leave that alone. But there is sometimes it's like, well, like for now, for instance, she just walked out the door with the kids and walked them down to my dad's house, and here's a little space, do what you want to do. But often I'm kind of inspired by noise and chaos. And the more hectic my life is, the more chaotic the music is. And like, I really find like on the worst days of my life, sonic youth is very therapeutic to just turn on, and all that noise feels like quiet, And I think probably lyrically and the structure of songs is similar. Like, you'll be able to hear where I'm at, deep down in my heart by the kind of noise I'm making.
Yeah.
I think
so.
I'm also BSing. I don't know.
No, and I feel you. Yeah. So Heroes on the Radio was your first album, right? Tell me your process of kind of putting those thoughts and songs together. What did that look like for you?
Well, I was like part of a worship band in Amarillo, and all my friends were like, hey, you're pretty good at writing songs. I was like, oh, cool. Like, I was really in love with the idea, but it was really instrumental for everybody to point at me and say, you could actually do this. Because the culture here, you're so far removed from people that are actually playing music for a living, that it's like, oh, well, everybody should have a hobby, like do something artistic. But most people didn't think it could be vocational by any means. In fact, when I dropped out of college, I was sitting in the lobby at West Texas A&M, and I was just sitting there going, what am I going to do? I've dropped out, but I'm still here. I'm still enrolled. And some old man was sitting next to me, and he just started talking to me. He's like, "So what are you doing? What are you studying?" I was like, "I actually dropped out. I'm going to write songs." And he says, "Well, what are you really going to do with your life?" And it was just like, oh, that's hard to overcome. So I was really blessed to have a bunch of friends that said, "No, man, you can do this. You can go.
Yeah.
You can make it happen." And so they basically, all my friends happen to be good at making music. So they said, "We're going to make a record. We're going to make it with you and for you, and let's go." And so we did that. I didn't know what I was writing. There's a lot of like stuff I can look back and go, I was trying to get at this or that. But kind of the bulk of those lyrics, I feel like I was like, there's a lot of raw stuff that's like, oh, that's really good. But it needed more direction lyrically. You know, I was good at painting pictures, not so good at tying them together at that time. But that's been 18 years ago or something like that. And so I've got a little better at tying those themes together now and kicking out this picture and drawing in this picture and using the pictures to tell more of a story. And I feel like I still love that record because there's a lightness to it. But I also am like, oh, you could have said a little more, you know. So
Yeah, but it was your person. I mean, how great is that to have, you know, have these friends who believe in you that much that they can lift you up to a point where you at the time couldn't lift yourself to, right? You're like, no, that's not realistic.
Yeah.
This old man that I don't even know is telling me I can't do it, you know. Like,
yeah, you're laying in bed going, I want to, but you know, it was like I also wanted to do a lot of other things. I wanted to play professional sports like every other boy, you know, at some point.
yeah,
And it was just like, well, that's not realistic. You're not fast enough, you know. And that's kind of the way I was looking at music. Like, well, that's not realistic. Of course you want to, but it's a little too romantic. On the other hand, like my mom set me down when I was like 12, and she kind of threw her hands up. She said, like, well, you better get really good at something because you're not going to fit into the rest of this world. Like, you're not going to be able to sit down at a job and at a desk and crank it out. So figure it out and go for it. So I did have encouragement along the way, but culturally, there's just so much stuff to tell you can't. I think some of that's changed now too. I mean, the internet's changed everything, but
yeah. What does it mean to you to have been written about by Rolling Stone, like for them to, you know, acknowledge your work and, you know, in the ways that they have? Like, what is that?
That's a hard answer. That's a hard question to answer. I have so many, you know, misgivings, not misgivings, it's the wrong word. As a publication, that somebody needs to hold their feet to the fire. They're so irresponsible with their journalism that it's like, it can be a little frustrating. Hopefully this comes out and they write about me before that, before they hear it.
Yeah.
But at the same hand, like the music journalists, there's people that are they're really great and they're really helpful. Man, I probably shouldn't even say any of this. So it means a lot. Like there's a journalist there that's written about me several times, and I couldn't be more grateful. And he really knows what he's talking about. It's really uplifting, and especially in like a culture like I was describing, like you can't do this, and they need to almost see from somewhere else, like, oh wow, you did do it, you know. So I've been in Rolling Stone, like I think online I've been in there like 15 times and once in the magazine or something, maybe exaggerating, but it's been a lot, and it really helped in ways that I didn't foresee, you know, like legitimizing me in somebody else's eyes. That way, when they get there, they're like, oh, this guy's really good. Listen to him, instead of me having to win him over. And that's been really great. And that's just due to the credibility of the journalist over decades, you know. So that's been really good. Yeah. On the other hand, like with Bob Dylan, they asked Bob Dylan the same question. And he's like, who cares? Because today they love me, tomorrow they hate me. And if I listen to him today, I gotta listen to him tomorrow. And so when I was first getting written about him, it really, really meant a lot. And it kind of didn't blow my head up, but it maybe changed my direction a little bit. And now I try to take it and just be really grateful. And at the same time, not give a shit, you know?
Yeah.
Because you can't control any of it. And someday I'll make a record that they think, oh, they haven't written about this one, so we'll see. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. You know, and if they love it, great. And if they don't, great. But at the same time, I'm really grateful. Specifically, there's a guy named Joe Hudak there who's been really encouraging and really supportive, and he knows what the hell he's doing. So it's great.
Yeah.
You know.
Dylan's a good example of one who doesn't give a shit. He marches to his own drum. He does his thing for himself.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think everyone was surprised when he was like being awarded the Nobel Peace Prize, right? And he's like,
whatever.
yeah, whatever, exactly. And it's like no one has
Yeah.
been ever, musician has ever been awarded it, right? But he's like, I think I'm busy.
Well,
What day
yeah.
is it? No, I'm busy.
Yeah. I try to let some of that kind of like reside in myself. Like, I don't want to go to the opera. Like, I don't need your club. Like,
Yeah.
especially when you get closer to these things and you realize like how much stuff is political. And like, if you want a Grammy, you have to run a campaign behind the scenes for a Grammy. It's like, they're not giving it to the best record. And it's not that they're doing a bad thing. They're doing a great thing. But like, if you want to do that, you need to play that game, which is not a bad thing. Do it. It can be really helpful. And they are picking really great records. But the guys that I've admired haven't spent their time on that. They like, okay, I can go get my Nobel Prize, or I can write another song. Like, what's the real reward? I write the other song.
Yeah.
And I'm also full of crap because it feels really great to be affirmed and noticed, and and I realize there's buddies of mine that haven't had the same accolades on them that definitely deserve it. And so I try to recognize that, and I'm really grateful for that. Don't hear me saying like, that stuff doesn't mean this is really helpful, and I'm really grateful. But also, like, the reward is writing the song, not even the finished song. The reward is living that way. So
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, I see what you're saying. I mean, there's a value to it, but it's not everything, right? I mean, there's a song, the music, the fans. I mean, the playing live shows, all of that's the stuff that's every day, right?
Yeah, real community is the reward, and the art, and the arranging the world around you in words and sounds. Participating in something that's thousands of years old. That's cool.
Yeah. So let's talk about the new album, Run Like a Bull. It's coming out next week, or is it? Next week, right? So
28th. I don't know what day it is, but the 28th.
I know, 11 days or whatever,
whatever day today is.
Yeah. So tell me about the process of this. I mean, did you write it all during COVID? Like, did it?
No, I've got. I think like a lot of other songwriters, I've got 1,000 voicemails on my phone, if not 5 or 10,000. I don't know. There's so many. And so I was looking the other day, I noticed like there's a song on the record. I started writing it in 2016,
Oh yeah.
And picked it up and finished it at some point along the way. And I have 3 or 4 records I'm trying to get to, but these songs felt, they had some urgency for me. And I was not locked down, but basically locked down in Nashville. It was like, well, you can't play music and tourism's shut down for the most part. So what are you going to do? And so I'm just sitting around the house for a long time writing and just getting stir crazy. And I just called my buddy Nilsson Hubbard, who produced the record for me in 2015. And I just was pacing up and down my driveway like, let's make a record. And he's like, okay, what are you doing? I was like, I want to sound like Neil Young and ZZ Top. And he's like, okay. He knew what I meant. It doesn't sound like like that at all, but I feel like it has the heart. And so we just went in, booked some time in the studio. Some people were still a little nervous, because it's like, in the middle of the whole thing, and it could be a little risky, but we just went into this small studio, and in 4 days we made it. We just went for it. There's not a lot of second guessing or, let's build out these giant tracks. Like, we just went for it.
Yeah. Have you recorded with Nilsson before?
Yeah, in 2015 we put out a record called Flatlands that I done with him, and that was a really kind of very intimate process where most of it was just me and him and the guitar. He had mixed something for me previously, and I just started when we were listening to the mixes, I started showing him songs. Well, what do you think about these 20 songs? And he's like, well, let's make a record. But we didn't really schedule any time. He was just like, I'll call you on days where I have a minute. And so he would shut down for the day, and he had a studio in his backyard, and I would go over and just record a song and talk about Mike Tyson. That's literally what we did. We talked about football, Mike Tyson, and we recorded songs. And then we brought a band in and finished the thing out. and it was weird because we kind of cut all these tracks to just me and the guitar, and then we brought in some guys on it, and then I was like, cool, so like, how are we gonna finish? And Nilsson's like, we are finished. What are you talking about? But when there was never a block of like studio time, so it didn't feel like we did it, which was probably what I needed, because blocking off 2 weeks to make the record would have made my head freak out, you know. He just snuck me in the back door of the whole process. And then 2018, I put out The Last American, and the half that record he wasn't involved with, but the second half, not really. I mean, the songs aren't in that order, but half the record he just helped us get it to the finish line, because he's really good at going, that's it, you're done, this is perfect, let's go, you know.
Yeah. And so what do you see he brings out of you in terms of these different albums that you create? What is it that, like, okay, you're like, you bring into the process, and especially when you have 4 days to make an album, like, what does he pull from you to bring it to light?
He makes me feel really comfortable and really uncomfortable. In some ways, it's really weird because the skill, like he can play all these things and this and that, and those are good things. He can find a melody, and a lot of producers are really proficient, right? But at their instruments. But the real skill set is just knowing when you hear it. You know, like on Flatlands, and really on this new record too, there were a lot of moments where it was like, let's maybe cut that one again or try it. And he's like, no, that's it. And in 2015, that record, I would have questioned him and I'd be like, no, let's do it again. Or in fact, I did, you know, when we cut Flatlands, so like, we should do that again or do this again. And he didn't argue with me. He said, okay, we'll do it your way. But in the end, you'll see my way is probably, I'm not wrong here, right? And so I would go home and, you know, a week later come in and listen. And he'd be like, do you want to cut it again? And I'd be like, no, you were right. And so his skill is just knowing when it's there, and zooming in on it. Like, forget all the BS around the song. Let's just zoom in on the song. And I feel like what he did for me was held up a mirror to me. So like, that's enough. Don't try to be something else. Don't cover it up. That's just enough. And all the mistakes that you think are mistakes are actually the best parts. So turn them up. And so the parts that I thought we would try to hide, he would literally turn them up. I'm like, oh, okay. And just realize, like, he taught me what it is to, like, just be, yeah, I don't know what the words are for it, but I feel great about just, you know, like when you listen to Steve Earle or Neil Young and you're like, hear this, right? And you're kind of like, this is shit. Like, some of this is rough, but it moves you, you know what I mean? There's still people that think Tom Petty can't sing, you know, and what they do, they just turned it up. Yeah. And you're like, oh yeah, character's good. Turn it, like, Neil Young is all over the place, you know, or you listen to those Whiskey Town records and they're tanking notes all over the place. And that's the best part of it. Like, you know, and they left it and it feels like humans are making music.
Feels real. Yeah.
Yeah. You know, and he just helped me do that, especially inside of town where I had all these other expectations. Like, you're going to go in and then these things are going to happen and they're going to make it feel like this. And he kind of went the other way. Like, no, you're going to feel more like home than you ever did. You know? So,
yeah. So I read something about the way that you play. You used to play faster and try and squeeze kind of more words into songs. Like, tell me about that progression for you in terms of how you find your voice to slow down and kind of fit. What was that?
Yeah, I don't know. Where'd you read it? I wonder.
Oh gosh, I don't remember.
I don't know. Just being comfortable with space, and especially, you know, like cutting with Nilsson the first time around taught me a lot, because you know, there were songs that was like, I need to go home and write this, and he was like, what are you talking about? Like, all that space is what makes a song, you know. It's just maturity, just growing up. And it's also like, I feel the same about my actual life. I'm trying to fill up every corner of it. In fact, I'm trying to clean out every corner of it, like, you know, physically and mentally. Like, you don't have to fill it up, turn off the Netflix, you know, throw away that trash can that you don't use, just throw it away or give it away. maybe that has something to do with songwriting. But I just feel better as a human, and I think part of that's like just not being mid-20s. You know, some people can get there fast. Cool for them. It just took me a second. You know.
Yeah. Yeah. So there were a couple of songs that you'd written like as lullaby type songs for your daughters, Moon Hangs Down and Tie My Pillow to Close to a Tree. Like, do you still play those like for them? I know they're getting older, but they still appreciate that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You know, it's hard to get them to play because I want them to learn Moon Hangs Down on the guitar, and they can do it, but they would rather play an Ernest Tubb song. So I'm fighting Ernest Tubb a little bit, but and then like my youngest, she's 4 and she's got like a toy ukulele. I mean, literally yesterday or the day before, she calls it Hangs Moons Down, Hangs Moons Down. She's just wailing on it. And those things have become like, you know, we just sing them a cappella most of the time, but and not like, unless lately we need to get back to it more. It's, you know, the people's songs, we need to sing our own too. But they're not just songs. They're like, I don't like the word mantra, but they're almost mantras. They're like little parables that we hang on to. And then we walk through what they mean, and I'm able to talk to them about what life is and what it isn't. And that's where it's really served us, you know, to be able to create our own dialogue and narrative that we can share amongst each other in song. You know, feels like magic.
Yeah. Well, what's the farthest your touring has taken you? How far have you traveled playing music?
I went to Hamburg, Amsterdam, Berlin, London, Dublin, all around. It's pretty wild.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Especially like I hadn't really been that many places. I grew up really remote Texas, and just like my dad was working really hard. It wasn't, you know, just to do the thing, you know. And so it wasn't like we traveled and grew up in some family that, you know, we didn't vacation in the city somewhere. You know, we went to grandma's once a year. It's great. It's fantastic. I actually prefer it. Like, so moving to Nashville was wild, but like when they started mentioning going to Dublin, I was like, whoa, I don't even know how to pack for that. And so it's been cool. Opened up my heart a little bit, opened up my eyes. It's been great.
How are the audiences there? Like, what differences do you see when you play in different places?
They listen. You know, I think there's like a romantic kind of aspect to it where they're like, oh, these Texas guys singing a song, you know, and they're into it, like listening from like listening from over here, trying to gather all that in, versus like when you're here, it's like people listen here too, but they're really interested in the literary aspect of it. So that was really cool.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, do y'all even speak English? I'm not even sure. There's definitely been places I play where I was like, half of you guys don't speak English, so I don't know what we're doing here. But music kind of can transcend that, so it's pretty cool. You know,
it's pretty amazing. What, as we kind of wind down, what's something that you learned about yourself through this weird time that we're in with the pandemic? Like, what is something that you've kind of taken away and been like, okay, I've been able to.
Man. Well, you know, I came home, and however that thing happened, you know, to move. I was living in the city everybody wants to be in, and I wasn't in love with that place anyway, but I really enjoyed it. But kind of some of that just got displaced by my love for home, and it just started, you know, it just makes you kind of like really narrow down, like, what do you want? What matters to you? And life's gonna get weird. It is weird. So who do you want to go through it with? You know, and it just made those things a way easier call for me. You know, like, you know, you're 1,000 miles away and things are nutty. You're on the phone talking to your dad. And you're like, this is stupid. I could just be down the street. Why am I on the phone with anybody? I could play music from anywhere. I could, you know. So I'm driving my wife crazy now because she's like, "Can you not spend all day at your dad's? Could you?" So I've got to kind of like correct a little bit. But
Look, we haven't lived next to each other for a while. Okay, come on, we got catching up to do.
Yeah, it just takes time. You know, I think that's what it did. It just made it easier to make that call. You know, it might take my wife a little bit longer to settle because the wind blows here like 50 mile an hour a lot of days.
Yeah.
And so it's, you know, it might take her a minute to really settle in.
And your girls did okay with the move?
They miss their friends.
Yeah.
But they've got like 7 cousins that live here, and they got, you know, grandma and grandpa and aunts and uncles and all that stuff. And there's a little more freedom, like to just, you know, there's a park across the street. And it's just, you know, we would take them to ballet in Nashville, and it's like anywhere from a 15 to 30-minute drive, depending on what things are like that day. And then you get there, and then my wife's like, "Oh, cool, I got to run back to the house, but what's the point? Because by the time I'm done, I got to drive." And it's like,
I know how that is.
And here they go to ballet, and it takes a minute and a half. You know, my wife would be like, "I'm taking them to ballet," and then she'll be back. I'm like, "When are you taking them?"
Did you leave yet? No.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. So they've enjoyed that. Like, you can really get to doing the thing you want to do, or like, you know, just the sunsets here are blowing their mind. So that's really great. And we're gonna, you know, when it gets a little warmer, we're gonna go look at the stars and lay out in the field and do all that. You know, there's
things you can't
that
really do in
magic
Nashville.
is accessible. Yeah. There's, you know, there's obviously a trade-off. It's like there's not 15 shows here tomorrow night, you know, but they weren't going to shows anyway, you know.
Yeah,
so,
things are different. I know.
Yeah.
I found myself missing concerts. I mean, but they exist now. Like, you know, for the first year plus, like there were no concerts and everything changed. And I was used to going to a concert a week or something. Now, last year I probably went to like 3 total. But you know, there are shows, but it's just like it's a payoff. You know, whether you go to it or not, it's like it's too much. It's the whole thing. You know.
Texas has done a good job. I know everybody's got critiques of everywhere or whatever, but there's a lot of outdoor venues that just kept rolling. I know people that started venues and then COVID hit 2 months later, and they've survived them just by going like, well, we're out. We got a big outdoor space, whatever. And they figured it out, you know, and they've actually become like a refuge for people. They're like, we can't do anything. Like there's a place called Turkey, Texas, and they have Hotel Turkey, and they put on these big shows. And so, well, they just did it all outside. So people were desperate for like, we just need to feel good. So they just have a show outside and spread the tables out, and everybody's pretty safe.
Some can thrive, and others don't make it. Actually, this shirt I'm wearing, Slim's, is a venue in San Francisco that was one of the first to go when the pandemic hit, and it was a place I grew up going to shows. You know, like it's like a lot of, you know, bands that exploded from there, and like bands that I was a fan of, and Slim's is gone, and Slim's is gone. You know, it's just like it was quite a blow, I'll tell you. So
yeah, there's a lot of venues that closed. There's a lot of venues that it's like, it's weird. Booking stuff can be weird now because you got like, well, we've slimmed down our staff. You're like, well, it can be weird to book something. This guy's like, I'm booking 5 different places and doing none of it well. You're like, oh well, it's not that helpful. You know, we're gonna miss a lot of restaurants. When you read the stats on local businesses, it's rough. But you know, here we are. Let's go. We'll survive.
Yeah. What do you see for 2022? Do you see getting out and touring? I know we're playing some shows last year.
Yeah, I leave the house. I drive to Dallas on Thursday, and I'm gonna play a place called the Grohl, which is one of those outdoor places that have figured out how to do it. And when they feel safe, they can move indoors. And I go to Houston, Mississippi, and then I'm playing a festival in Key West. And it's all outdoors, and should be good. I think it's outdoors. I don't know. At some point, I'm also like, well, and I'm sure I'll get judgment for it, but I'm like, at some point, you just gotta live. Like,
gotta live. I mean, it's been cutting up to 2 years. You know, I mean, how long can you put life on hold, right? So
it's really difficult. I'm not a very cautious person anyway, so I'm like, we took it very seriously, and we still do. But I'm also gonna go play, and if somebody wants to show up, you know, great, come live. It'll be good.
Yeah. I like it. Well, Ryan, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it. And I wish you luck with the new album coming out next week.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. And yeah, definitely stay safe and good luck with the shows coming up. Okay.
Awesome. I appreciate it so much. Thank you.
That was the interview with Ryan Caldwell here on Concert Pipeline. And that takes us to the final segment on the program, the music news. All right, I have a couple of stories to wind out the program here today. First is an alumni of Concert Pipeline, someone I interviewed many years ago, actually, Mr. Ted Nugent. I got to interview him, I think 2005, somewhere around there. Oh God, it's like almost half my life ago. It was crazy. Interview him on his tour bus outside the Fillmore. Well, he felt snubbed by the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, but he did and he didn't, is what he's saying. He's flip-flop on his feelings about it. He said, I don't need it. And so he opened up about that snub in an interview with the Real Music Observer. He said it was ridiculous that he didn't qualify. He went on to double down on his comments, about which artists he felt should and shouldn't be inducted into the hall. And he said, when I criticize the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, let's take me out of the equation. Let's say I don't qualify, which is ridiculous, but let's pretend I don't qualify. But why ABBA before Styx? Why Patti Smith before Triumph? Why Grandmaster Flash or Jay-Z at all? Ooh, that's a burn. And, don't want to say anything racist there, but come on, you're calling them out. To think that they would qualify before the artists I just mentioned, and myself included, it's just dishonest, and it's literally disrespectful to the gods of this music, Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley and all the gods that created this incredible soundtrack. And by the way, I remember Nugent talking about Chuck Berry and Bo Diddley when I interviewed him 15 years ago. He's really a big fan of theirs, apparently. He continued, but I don't take it personally because I don't need it. It sounds like he's taking it personally. Come on. And quite honestly, the authenticity of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame has been so tainted by the inclusion of not just non-rockers, but anti-rockers. Madonna, really? So I find it offensive on that level. I go back to the people thinking I hated Grandmaster Flash. I don't hate anybody. I don't take this stuff personally, but I find it offensive to real rockers, to real rock artists, and to real rock and roll fans. And I hope he's happy. I hope he's healthy and successful. But Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, why don't we just go down to Chuck Berry's grave and take a shit on it? That's what that represents to me, and it's unforgivable. All righty, Ted Nugent. Yes, we know how you feel about that. Or do we? You kind of flip-flopped. You did a decent amount of flip-flopping there in your sharing of how you're feeling. All right, this story was interesting to me. It's not really about a musical artist, right? But I heard this on the news the other day, or on a late night talk show, which is my version of the news, because I stay away from news. I don't watch it. I try and not get sucked into any of that nonsense. So I like to laugh at it, though, while being informed slightly. Pope Francis left the Vatican to visit a local record shop, and he walked away with a free CD. I don't know if you need more than that for that story, but that's enough, right? On Tuesday, January 11th, Pope Francis was spotted by Javier Martinez Brocal, director of the Rome Reports news agency, heading to Stereo Sound, a CD and vinyl store in Rome. He'd stopped by to bless the recently renovated store, which he apparently frequented before the beginning of his papacy in 2013. Okay. Nobody can get this guy a CD. Nobody can get the Pope a CD, really. And also, he can't stream. He can't stream. I don't know. And not many people buy CDs anymore anyway, which is sad in and of itself. I miss having the physical medium. And there's once in a while that I will buy a physical CD to have it, or to get the artist to sign it, or what have you, if I really care. But seeing the Pope coming out of a CD shop, like, who thought that was a good idea? He was here for maybe 20 minutes, just time for us to have a chat. It was an honor, very emotional. He is a great person, a simple man, but marvelous. Tiziana Esposito, one of the owners of the shop, told the Telegraph. He used to come here before he became Pope, when he was the Archbishop of Buenos Aires and visiting Rome. This time we gave him a present, a CD, but I'm not telling anyone what it is. What is the Pope listening to that he's going to the CD shop for? He can't get it anywhere else. I love it. That's my favorite story. All right. Bruce Springsteen confirmed as the highest paid musician of 2021. The results are in. He brought in a reported sum of $590 million, most of which he earned via the landmark sale of his masters and publishing rights last month. Okay, so sold his rights at the end of the month, and that made him a lot of money, apparently. The figure comes from a new report shared by Rolling Stone last Friday, wherein former Forbes editor Zach O'Malley Greenberg noted that all but 3 of last year's 10 highest earners banked on multi-million-dollar catalog sales. That's where the money is, folks, apparently, selling your catalog. So his record-breaking deal with Sony was valued at $550 million. Okay, and his reported total sum is 590. So does that count? Like when almost everything is from one transaction deal? I don't know. But that marked the biggest sale a musician had ever made for the discography. So I mean, it's something to be proud of for sure, right? It gave the company ownership of the boss's entire back catalog, which spans 20 studio albums, 300 songs, 7 EPs, 23 live records, and more. He had set his sights on upwards of $350 million for both the publishing rights and recorded masters to his expansive catalog. And it was originally reported that he pulled in $500 million for the sale, though Greenberg says that his $550 million figure was generated by scouring public documents and interviewing individuals with direct knowledge of major deals. So imagine going in and expecting $350 million, coming out with $550 million. Like, wow, right? What do you, like, you just bulked $200 million extra that you weren't even expecting. The other 40 million, the bulk of it came from his return to Broadway last summer, where he did 26 shows, as well as 2 collaborative projects with former US President Barack Obama, a book and a Spotify exclusive podcast, Renegades Born in the USA. So you could check that out as well. Interesting. Good work, Bruce. Long live the legacy, huh? Judas Priest have reversed their decision to remove guitarist Andy Sneap from touring lineup. It was reported last week that that he was no longer going to be in the touring lineup, and apparently that is being redacted. So they've reintroduced him within a week to their touring lineup, just 5 days after announcing he would not be joining them on the road. Sneap, who co-produced the band's latest album, Firepower, joined Priest's live setup after the longtime guitarist Glenn Tipton announced he'd be diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 2018. However, last week, the band issued a statement to announce that ahead of their upcoming North American tour, they would be returning as an even more powerful, relentless 4-piece heavy metal band, signaling Sneap's departure. So Snape released a separate statement explaining that the decision was incredibly disappointing. And then Rob Halford called me last Monday and said that they wanted to move on as a 4-piece, which I find incredibly disappointing after this amount of time. But I respect his decision, as they obviously had a vision of how they wanted this to play out. Apparently that was all a temporary situation. And now making a U-turn 5 days after that, Judas Priest have confirmed they will continue touring as a 5-piece, with Sneap remaining as touring guitarist and Tipton making appearances when he can. This is what they said. Hello, Metal Maniacs. Given all that has recently evolved and transpired, we have decided unanimously as a band to continue our live shows unchanged, with Rob, Ian, Richie, Andy, and Glenn joining us whenever he's able. So see you as soon as we forge ahead and celebrating 50 massive heavy metal years of Judas Priest together. 50 years. It's incredible. It's incredible. So, you know, what's to say you can't redact it and admit to making a mistake, right? Good for them. All right. The final story is, of course, about Mr. Dave Grohl and the Foo Fighters. So The Foo Fighters have put out this Studio 666 trailer. As we talked about last week in the program, they are going to have a horror comedy film called Studio 666, which is premiering in theaters on February 25th. As the band writes and records new music, frontman Dave Grohl finds himself possessed by supernatural forces that threaten the completion of the album in the lives of the band. The movie stars the band, of course, alongside Whitney Cummings, Will Forte, Jenna Ortega, Jeff Garlin. There's a cameo from Lionel Richie, which you see in the trailer as well. Whitney Cummings warns this is not just a creepy rock and roll house. It also allows spiritual entities to cross into our world. So there's a demonic force. I don't know. It seems really cool. I am looking forward to seeing that. And of course, I trust everything that Mr. Dave Grohl puts out. Big fan. That's the show for today. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you to Ryan Culwell for being on the program. Next week on the program, we will likely have Dale Bozio. I'm expecting to have a good chat with her. She has many stories that I look forward to sharing. So that's our show for today. For all of us here at Concert Pipeline, I'm Steve Jones. We'll catch you next time.